And I think that I'm live.
Yeah, I think I'm live on my end too. Hold on, what's going on here? Yeah, we are live. I'm just going to adjust you a little bit, your position, so your head's nicely framed. Okay, good. So we're live. I'm here with Kevin. Kevin, how are you doing?
Pretty good, David. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Over the past few days, I've been watching as much of your content as I can, and I'm a new fan.
Excellent. And I've discovered you because you reached out. I haven't had time to really watch your stuff a little bit. I watch it a little bit, but I don't like to form opinions about people. I like to discover them on the interview. So we're simulcasting here. I hope it goes well technically. Everything seems good. And I'd like to start just by asking you about your journey. You can ask me about my stuff later, but right now I want to start with you. How were you raised? I think you were raised FSSP, if I'm not mistaken, but you'll fill me in. I want you to jump back to your earliest memories of God and religion and prayer life and home life, church life, and just fill in the gaps all the way up till today at your own pace.
Certainly. So I remember religion before I remember, anything else, really. Religion was a very big part of my family. So starting even before I was born, I guess. My grandparents immigrated from Ireland to the United States in the 60s. When they got here, this was right around the same time as Vatican II. So they wound up founding a church, and the question at the time was, should it be an SSPX church or an FSSP church? Because this was after the FSSP had split off from the SSPX. And they wound up going with FSSP, not because of anything else, really. I think that it just came down to a vote, and the congregation at that church voted FSSP. And so I grew up in this FSSP church that my grandparents helped to found. So as I'm sure you can imagine, there's a decent amount of familial pressure. Hey, you're the grandson of one of the founders. And I was an altar boy from a very young age. In first grade, I was serving low masses. And by the time that I was perhaps 12 or 13, I was doing MC at traditional sung high masses, which is the highest ranked altar boy. So it's, quite a complicated ceremony compared to a lot of Novus Ordo ceremonies and things like that. I took the confirmation name John Vianney because I thought I wanted to be a priest, and St. John Vianney is the patron saint of priests. And hey, there he is! Look at that. That's pretty cool. So my full name, if you count my confirmation name, is Kevin James John Vianney O'Connor, which I think has a very funny ring to it. But anyway, I was, I would have called myself a very devout Catholic until I was about 18. Then when I was 18, one of my friends from this tiny little FSSP chapel came out as gay. And so that was kind of the first time that I actually had a challenge to my faith, I guess. And so I understood that the church teaching was that homosexual relations were disordered. I didn't fully understand why, but I thought I better get to the bottom of this. I better figure out why. So I started looking into teleology primarily, because the church grounds its understanding of marital relationships in teleology, and I realized that I just didn't really think that morality was teleological. I didn't think that teleology was a veridical thing, really. And this was over the course of a long time. So over the course of probably 4 years, piece by piece of my Catholicism kind of started dropping out. So from 18, I went from being pretty much as Catholic as a Catholic can be, so I lost my belief in teleology, and I lost my belief that gay marriages were wrong. But when you lose teleology, that kind of opens up the door to everything else. So I started looking into Greek philosophical thought in general. I realized that I didn't really think that hylomorphism was veridical either. So I kind of lost my belief in substances. And without substances, you kind of can't have transubstantiation. At least I haven't figured out a way to make it work without substances. So then I lost my belief in transubstantiation. I still would have called myself Catholic at this point, just a very unorthodox one. Eventually, I stopped calling myself Catholic, and I started using the merely Christian a la C.S. Lewis. After another year of that, maybe I kind of just called myself a theist, but not necessarily a Christian. 6 months later, I was calling myself a deist. And then maybe 6 months after that, and by this time I'm about 22, I'd say, I just started calling myself an atheist. Though to be clear, I never really had any real arguments to make like a positive case for atheism. And I just continued, reading philosophical papers and trying to listen as much as I could to the brightest Catholic minds. And here I am today about, so just I'm 27 now. So, and the label that I use for myself is agnostic. I find that there's no like real label for like every single set of beliefs that you could possibly have, right? Like you can have a different opinion about mereology and nominalism and theism and morality. And like, if you don't fall neatly into a bucket like Catholicism, then there's no real word for what you are.
Kevinism.
So yes, Kevinism, I suppose. And that's pretty much where I am now. So more than happy to go into each individual topic and kind of give you where I'm at now. But I think, we would be here all day.
Yeah. Well, let me just jump back to family relations. How many siblings do you have?
3.
Yeah.
Only 3, which is small for that culture. Yeah. But I grew up a mile down the road from my cousins, and there were 7 of them. So.
Okay. And and you police yourself, you watch what you say so you don't get yourself in trouble saying something about that's too personal or whatever, okay? But I'll just ask and you can answer in a way that's appropriate to protect your privacy and the dignity of your family and everything. But what was the reaction like? Was there a loving acceptance of your ongoing journey, or was there anger? Just talk a little bit about the different reactions, the highlights that you're able to talk about.
Yeah, so I will watch what I say here, but I think that I'll be able to express it in a proper manner. It was a negative reaction, due in large part to I think my delivery of the news. Mm-hmm. So I had gone through probably 4 years worth of evolution, for lack of a better term, without telling anybody about this. And the reason I didn't tell anybody is because in that culture, there is no freedom of, opinion. It's conform or be ostracized. And so it wasn't until I got a job offer that was going to move me 800 miles away. And I told them, hey, my girlfriend who I've been dating for 5 years is going to come with me. Because I stopped thinking that it was a sin to like live with somebody before you're married. So I kind of just told my parents all at once, hey, I'm not Catholic. I haven't been Catholic for a long time. They kind of saw this coming for like, I hadn't been wearing a scapular for several years at this point. And I grew up with a brown scapular. So they kind of saw it coming, but I just, I dropped multiple bombs on them at the same time, which was not fair of me to do. And so as you can imagine, the reaction was quite negative. I didn't wind up speaking to my family for over a year. I moved across the country. And we had quite a bad relationship for a long time. Things are much better now. And I think in some ways so I was the first person in my family to actually like openly express that I'm not religious. And I have noticed like changes in my family. Like my younger siblings can do things my parents never let me do, which I found interesting. But I think that, there's, I've evolved, but I also think that my family and the culture that my family is in has also changed, if that makes sense. So it was a negative reaction, but things are much better.
Okay. Has there been any, and again, you'll watch what you say, but has there been any explicit acknowledgement of a failure on the part of your parents? This is very touchy, but the failure on the part of your parents to, to raise you and to have the freedom, and have they acknowledged some of their failings in the way that they've guided you in the faith, and maybe haven't been in touch with your inner life and only concerned with the outer life and these sorts of things?
Yeah, so my parents, I'm pausing only because I want to think about the words that I use here. Emotional. So I'm going to use a word that probably isn't the best word, but I'm going to use the word manipulation. That's probably not the best word. I can probably think of a better word if I thought about it a little bit more, if I was just a brighter person. But emotional manipulation is kind of a staple within that community. And there was a lot of emotional manipulation when I first broke the news to them. There were words spoken such as, "Oh, you know, your elderly relatives will pass away when they hear this news because of how broken their hearts will be," and oh, if any of if any of your siblings, Kevin, find out about your lack of belief in Catholicism, I will kill you. Things like that.
In the heat of the moment, you're talking.
Yes, in the heat of the moment, with apologies, like, the next day. But definitely emotional manipulation. And then also part of that too was, oh, where did I go wrong that my son wound up? So, oh, I'm worried now that I'm going to go to hell because my son. So Kevin, not only are you damning yourself, but you're damning your parents too, through your actions. So yeah, there was a lot of that. It was not good.
But since that time, like today, things are better, and they understand. Do they understand their own faith better today? That's what I'm asking you, really. Do they understand their own faith better and the priorities within their own worldview? Because it seems to me that in the trad world, there's a pharisaical element, and that can come back to bite you.
So the answer is going to be different for both of my parents. The answer for my dad, I think, is yes. The answer for my mom, I think, is no.
We just got a note from Haley Luja saying, Kevin, your sound is not working on your end. Okay, check your audio. But you can always, are you recording this so you can play it back? Otherwise, I can send you a copy of this from my YouTube, and you can post it as pre-recorded.
I very well might need you to share the recording with me. I'm going to try real quick.
Yeah, set up your audio. Set up your audio.
Yeah.
Do you know Haley Luja?
I do. She's a friend.
I guess it's pronounced Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, yeah. Her name's Haley, but Hallelujah. So it was working when I did the recording, which is confusing. If I don't get this in about 60 seconds, I will I will give it up. So it should be working now. Thank you so much for the note, Haley.
I asked her if it's working now. She'll respond soon, probably.
Okay. We'll keep on trucking. If it doesn't work.
Yeah. What did I ask you, and what was your answer?
So you just asked me if my parents have come to like a different understanding of their faith through this whole ordeal, and my response to that was that it's different for each of my parents. For my mom, no. For my dad, yes. The reason I say for my mom, no, she is the kind of person who'll use the phrase like, my faith is a simple faith. She doesn't necessarily know why she believes it, but she kind of doesn't care. She's going to just live in this community and be part of the community, and she likes it this way, and so she doesn't need to read the Summa Theologica. Just, she's happy to leave things as they are.
So it's working. It is working, by the way. The audio is working.
Perfect. Thank you. But my dad is the kind of person who's like into the apologetics space. And so I do think that my dad has like changed his stance on certain things. And so I do think that if like a younger sibling of mine came out as not religious, I do think that my dad would have a very different reaction today than he did 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's a very delicate. The whole story is not uncommon, but it's so tragic and it's so delicate. And parenting is not easy. I'm not a parent, sadly, but I don't envy parents. I don't. It's not easy. Any relationship is difficult, but particularly when we're mixing in power dynamics and religion and guilt trips and stuff like that. And I'm not saying that parents do it maliciously or evilly. It's just sort of like it's just sort of something that is bound to happen in, if your parents are highly placed in politics or business or anything, there's always going to be that power dynamic. It's just a reality. It's sad, but that's what we have to struggle with in this sick and fallen world. So I do have a lot of sympathy for people that go through it. I have sympathy for you because of this ordeal. And I frankly am proud of you that you are following the truth wherever it leads you, and that you are struggling to find the truth. And you know, that's more important to me than having a good exterior where you're going through the motions of religion that you don't really believe in. I think it's better to be honest.
Thank you for saying that. I definitely agree. Right, right. Obviously, I agree. Right, but the way that I kind of phrased what you just said is that I think I've taken the real Pascal's wager in as much as you know, I'm doing my best, and if my best isn't good enough, then I can kind of just say that I've left it all on the field, and that I hope that, you know, if there's a God that, you know, does exist, I think that God would value truth seeking above going through the motions.
Oh, for sure.
And so that's kind of where I am.
Yeah, well, even if God doesn't exist, and that's an absurd hypothesis, but even if God didn't exist, you would still have humans like myself who would encourage you to be sincere and authentic. And so it's win-win for you to follow your, not to follow every impulse of your heart, because the impulses of your heart are depraved and evil. Sometimes. You know from your own experience with indulging in the wrong kinds of food or sex or whatever, you know that you are prone to temptations that aren't always good. Even if you don't believe in God, you still have that experience, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Every now and then I'm like, you know, I get this weird, like, hey, wouldn't it be weird if I just jumped off this bridge? You know, and I'm not actually going to do it. But certainly, yeah, not all inclinations are inclinations that should be acted upon, certainly.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, especially when it comes to suicide. I've thought about it in the abstract with zero emotional investment. And, you know, I'm against it. With or without God, I'm against it. I'm against it in principle, but my religion obviously teaches me that it's not good too. And so I personally like the idea of being able to play with ideas, provided that we're grounded in solid principles. And you, with the childhood that you have, with the family that you have, I'm sure that you're grounded in a lot of solid principles, and that you're not just going to flush them all down the toilet. You're going to test them. You're going to stretch the boundaries. You're going to maybe come back to some of the ones that you thought you could abandon. And it's an ongoing process. You're very young. I mean, I'm 52, you're 27. So not that wisdom necessarily comes with age, but when you do get old and sick, if you do get old and sick and are facing death, that's going to help too.
I hope I get old one day.
But it will help. It really does help, I think, your spiritual life facing mortality, the death of loved ones, these sorts of things. So I'm not wishing ill on you or anyone else, but the nature of this fallen world is, from my Catholic perspective, is that when we have to suffer, we make some tough choices, and we go back on some of our childish, intellectual decisions that we made. I was an atheist for most of my adult life, and I'm not ashamed. I was doing what I thought, I was following my trajectory, and you're doing the same thing. Everyone's got a very beautiful and unique path. That's the way I see it. It's a beautiful and unique path. So I just cheer you on, encourage you, and I do that for everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, I was listening to one of your interviews earlier today, and I remember you saying something to the effect of you will often have masses said for your guests and things like that. And I think that's super cool.
Guest, yeah,
that's awesome. Even me?
Of course. Especially
all right.
You. Especially you.
All right. Good. Something I get really so I hesitate to use the word compatriot or colleague or anything like that with kind of hard atheists. But something I get frustrated with certain capital A atheists is they act like prayer is insulting, or at like the very least they'll act as if it's like preposterous and silly. And the way that I view it is that even if you assume the falsity of what the person who's saying that they're praying for you is going to say, at the very the least good thing that it could be saying is that they are thinking about you and they're wishing you well. They want the best possible thing that could possibly happen to you.
Yeah.
How can you possibly be insulted or treat that? How can you even trivialize that? Frankly.
Yeah.
It's
the appropriate reaction is gratitude. The appropriate reaction is gratitude. Yeah. A deep gratitude. You're wishing me well. That's called love. That's what love is. Atheists should not reject love. They should embrace it, and they should have a lot of gratitude for it. But, you know, people, like I said, I was confused. People are confused. I'm still confused. I'm not going to say that I'm not confused now about the most fundamental important things and even the essential saving truths. I'm confused about the Trinity. I'm confused about the Incarnation. I'm confused about all these things. I'm accused about who and what God is. But, you know, it's the heart and soul of religion is having goodwill. That, for me, that's it. The heart and soul. And I told Aaron Ra, who's a devout atheist, I told him, if you never have ill will, then I don't know, but I think you're going to heaven. Sorry. I think you're going to heaven, buddy. He didn't like to hear that, but
yes. And Aaron Ra and, you know, Matt Dillahunty and, you know, the list goes on. Those are the kind of people that I have in mind when I talk about the kinds of people who scoff at religious people saying that they're going to remember them in their prayers or something. You know, I don't think that's the right attitude.
So you did mention your gay friend or whatever that came out in the FSSP community. Can you just shed some light on that? Because that's a very unique situation. I've never heard about that. It's probably kept hush-hush for the most part.
Oh,
can you just talk about that without impinging on the dignity of anyone involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So his family was also very well connected. The church has a school that's associated with it. I went to that school for 1st through 8th grade. It's essentially homeschooling, except that instead of at my home, it's at my church, which was a mile down the road from where I lived anyway. And my mom wasn't teaching me. My friends' moms were teaching me. But my friend, his mother and grandmother were both teachers at this school. And he was kicked out of the school for being gay. So it was a very big deal, but it was simultaneously a huge deal. And they also tried to not talk about it whatsoever. He was kicked out, but the going story was that like, he was going to go finish his high school education at the local community college to set him up better for college. That was like the cover up. It was like, he's just very academically minded. So he's going to go finish his GED at the local community college instead of going to finish high school with everybody else. So yeah, that was, I sometimes wallow in my own self-pity. And then I think about my friend, and how much worse it must have been for him. You know, all that I did was come out as a straight, but non-Catholic person in this Catholic community. And think about how much worse it must have been for him to come out as a not straight person in this Catholic community. It must have been way, way, way harder than what I went through. So
you knew him. You were sort of like a friend of his or something.
Oh, we were very close.
Okay, so was there any indication that he was hesitating whether it was an unrepentant or a repentant condition that he was suffering from my perspective?
He was Catholic when he came out. And so I'm sure that he went through the same thing that like a lot of Catholic gay people go through, where it's, you know, the whole, you know, well, can I just live a chaste life forever? Should I remain Catholic? Do I think that this is really a sin? I'm sure that he went through, to be honest, we didn't talk about that because I was still very much so Catholic at the time. The way that I explained it to you at the beginning was, you know, a sentence for every year that it took me to think these things through. So at the time that he came out, I really didn't talk to him for a while after that.
What about today?
So now we live on different parts of the country, so we don't talk as much as I would like, but I do reach out to him every now and then, and we talk. And whenever I'm back in my home state, we, you know, not whenever, but I'd like to see him more than I do, to be honest. But I'm like that with a lot of my friends. So I don't see him as much now as I would like to, but we do still talk.
Do you have any guilt, whether you think it's justified or not, any guilt about your sexual activity?
My own or
yours,
his?
Yours.
No, I don't have any guilt about mine. I was in the position where I had thought everything through pretty thoroughly before I acted on anything. So I really didn't do anything like, well, so I had premarital sex, but I was already in my 20s by then. And we got married when we were 22. So we got married like pretty early, me and my wife. So I'm married. I've got a ring on. My wife is my absolute best friend. Marrying her was the best thing that I ever did. I do regret we both regret the way in which we got married. But we got married when we were 22. And getting married itself was an excellent decision. And I really don't have any, I have way more regrets about getting married so young than I do about any kind of, sexual activity. I don't think that I've done, so I wouldn't consider any of the sexual things that I've ever done to be like wrong, like immoral,
Yeah.
because that list for me is a lot smaller than it would be for somebody who's like, an Orthodox Catholic.
Yeah, of course. So you did mention the teleology and its connection, if any, to morality. Did you want to expand on that just a little? I've never heard anyone talk about this disconnect between
sure.
teleology. Is it a common theme that you encounter, the disconnect between teleology and morality?
No, it's not common, really. So I tried to find people talking about this just on the internet when I was looking into it, and I really only found one person talking about it. His name is Dustin Crummett, I believe. He is a PhD theologian he's Protestant. He's not Catholic, and he's kind of in the same boat that I'm in the sense that he doesn't think that morality is teleological in nature. But the only arguments that I could find Catholics using for the immorality of homosexual relations were teleological. And I couldn't ever find any real justification for why morality should be teleological. So at that point, it's just kind of like an Occam's razor of like, well, morality mustn't be teleological. I don't see why it would be. So until I'm convinced that it is, I'm going to think that it's not. And if the only reason why we can imagine gay relations being wrong are teleological reasons, then I guess I just don't think that gay relations are wrong. And Dustin Crummett, it was really the only philosopher I could find like talking about it. Of course, Aquinas has an entry. I don't recall the number off the top of my head. But Aquinas has an entry in the Summa where he talks about teleological morality. And I'm very confused by it, to be 100% honest, because Thomas argues that it's actually not. So he argues that it is immoral to frustrate the telos of an act. But then in a very Thomistic way, he says, but what if, and then he sets up he tries to steel man the opposite end. And so he brings up an acrobat. He says an acrobat might walk on his hands as part of a circus act. The teloi of the hands is not to walk. So by walking on your hands, you are frustrating the ends of you're frustrating the telos of the hand when you use it to walk. So is that a sin? And Thomas says, no, it's not a sin for the acrobat to walk on his hands. And the justification, I'm going to butcher this.
Mm-hmm.
So please don't don't take anything that I say as gospel. But what Thomas says about this is more or less, it's not a sin because it's not actually unhealthy for you or anything like that to walk on your hands. It's not bad for the human person to walk on your hands. Therefore, even though you're frustrating the telos of your hands, it's not wrong. And to me, I almost find that like a tacit admission that morality is not teleological in nature. But then that's kind of it. And then Thomas, that's really like the only mention that I could find in like the whole Summa of like morality being teleological in nature. So, and I'm just a kid, right? So don't listen to me about it. But
well, I mean, my approach to, if you want to call it apologetics, I call it slopologetics because I'm very sloppy with my apologetics. But the basic idea of why I talk to people is to see where they're at on their journey and to support them, to love them and whatever, to pray for them. But also if I can nudge them in the right direction. So my basic approach with an agnostic or an atheist is to talk about the fact that you exist and how do you think that you exist? Are you the source of your own existence? And one small point before we go on, I always like to ask my guests if they believe in evolution. Did you believe in evolution in the FSSP, or did you believe in young earth creationism as I do?
I grew up a young earth creationist. However, we wound up getting a priest when I was in like 7th or 8th grade, who came in and like shook the world by saying it's okay to believe in evolution. I myself didn't wind up accepting evolution quite yet. I didn't go to that church school, the FSSP affiliated school, for high school. I went to my local public high school for high school. So in high school, I had a whole bunch of like my scientific beliefs challenged. And so by the time that I was probably 15 or 16, I did wind up accepting the old Earth and evolution. But even the evolution that I accepted then was probably like still special creation for man. Like man was created in the manner in which we have to believe, like Adam and Eve were created, and or at least they were, at the very least, they were given souls. Like even if God kind of created them out of the great apes, like he infused the first immortal soul into one of those great apes, and that was Adam. So that was at least what I believed by the time I was like 16. But I did grow up a young Earth creationist. We used the Abeka brand of textbooks, and the Abeka brand of textbooks are kind of famous, or maybe infamous, for including religion in all of their topics. So the math problems were like, oh, Mr. Jones tithes 10% of his annual income, and his annual income is $60,000. So how much does Mr. Jones tithe every year? And the science textbooks were also like creationist science textbooks. So
interesting. How do you spell Abeka or Rebecca?
Abeka, or perhaps KK.
It's pretty famous anyway.
To be honest, so it's 1K. I looked it up. Abeka.
Okay.
And they are famous, but really they're more famous in Protestant circles.
Okay, I was going to ask
used,
that,
yeah. They were used by like evangelical Protestant homeschooling communities. But we used them. Oh, and what's funny is that our history textbooks would teach about the Protestant Reformation.
Right.
But whenever my school bought these books, they would go to all the references for the Reformation and take a Sharpie and cross out the word Reformation and then write revolt in its place. So it was the Protestant Revolt, not the Protestant Reformation. But these were Protestant books. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, kind of funny.
I am quite surprised that one of your priests, FSSP priests, was pro-evolution, but I find it quite shocking.
Yes, he wasn't an FSSP priest. My chapel wound up like adopting this just traditionalist friendly priest who went through the normal Novus Ordo seminary. And he got special permission from the bishop of the archdiocese just to kind of have his home base be in our FSSP chapel, even though he himself was not FSSP. And he had a master's degree in like biochemistry or something. So he was like a particularly science-minded person, but he was just he was probably more akin to your diocesan Latin Mass priest than he was FSSP.
Okay, interesting.
So yeah, I misspoke earlier.
So, but that confirms my my hunch that you won't get a lot of FSS. I don't have a lot of experience with the FSSP, although I did meet a couple of priests here, and I've gone a couple of times, and I do really love and respect the FSSP. I don't really care for the SSPX, but that's a different topic. But I wanted to, if it's possible, to sort of talk about ontology, like you exist, you can't deny that you exist. This is how I came to God, right? Just contemplating the fact that I exist, and I was studying philosophy as an amateur. So how do you explain the fact that you exist, or are you not really, are you not concerning yourself? Are you happy to be agnostic about the most fundamental and important questions? Or are you actually curious to have a grounding and a basis philosophically for your worldview, even though you call yourself an agnostic right now?
Yeah. So this is going to be a lot of different moving pieces. Let me do my very best to explain this as succinctly as I can. So am I happy with like the agnosticism? Happy is definitely not the right word, because I wish that I was like omniscient and I knew everything. But I guess I do have some kind of like tacit acceptance of my agnosticism, because I do think that there are some things that I cannot know. So in that sense, I might be agnostic about certain things. One of those things is hard solipsism. I cannot claim to have solved hard solipsism. I cannot prove to you that I'm not a brain in a vat being poked by, aliens on Mars. I cannot prove that to you. However,
that's soft solipsism. If you're being poked by another being, if there's a material universe and aliens,
true.
that's soft solipsism. If you're hard solipsism, you're a disembodied mind.
Yes, thank you. Yes,
you're the god of Buddhism at that point.
Yes, and I can't disprove either solipsisms. Really, I can't claim that I've solved it. I'm not smart enough to have.
You don't have the lab equipment for that. Just kidding.
Right. Yeah. So in that sense, I'm kind of just tacitly, I've made my peace with it, but I'm certainly not happy about it in that sense. However, I do think that I can move. So I really liked your video where you had the Venn diagram with the 3 circles overlapping, and you had faith, but faith alone is fideism. You had doubt, but doubt alone is. Did you have that labeled as solipsism? Doubt alone is solipsism?
No.
What was it? Remind me.
Let me see if I can pull it up here.
I'll keep talking while you pull it up. So I do agree with this, particularly with the faith part. I think that everybody does need to have at least some modicum of faith, in the sense that I can't solve hard solipsism, but I live my life as if I have. And because I live my life as if I have solved hard solipsism, you could certainly call that faith. So I have faith that solipsism isn't true. Why? I have no evidence for this. I just take it on faith and live my life that way, and that's the best I can do.
Yeah, we have up at the top with it, it's exclusively faith, it's fideism. If it's exclusively doubt, it's nihilism. If it's exclusively reason, it's agnosticism. And then if you have a mixture of doubt and reason, it's solipsism. If you have a mixture of only doubt and faith, then it's cynicism or naive realism. And then I had a mixture of faith and reason giving you fanaticism. And then the perfect balance in the center is Roman Catholicism. It's one of my favorite episodes that I've done. And I stand by it. I don't, it's not infallible, obviously. It's just a thought experiment, and it's just talking aloud. But I'm glad you took the time to listen to it. Appreciate that.
Yes, yeah. And really, I agree with the vast majority of what you said there. Now, the one, and we'll get here, I'm sure, but the one place I disagree is at the very center, being labeled Roman Catholicism. Right.
Obviously.
Right. But I really do agree with the vast majority of that. And so, let me back up now. So am I happy about it? No, I'm not happy about it, but I've kind of made my peace with it and moved on. I want to know all about everything, frankly. I'm just a naturally curious person. And I love wrestling with these questions just about ontology at large. And kind of one of the reasons I started my YouTube channel was so that I could have conversations exactly like the one that we're having today. I wouldn't have discovered you if it wasn't for one of your fans telling me to reach out to you. And I wouldn't have had that fan of yours telling me to reach out to you if I didn't start my channel. So for this reason alone, I'm happy to have started my channel, just because I get to have this very conversation. Yeah, that's why I started the channel, was to kind of wrestle with these topics exactly like you said.
Amazing. Yeah, that's the thing. It's such a dynamic journey. And if you were to talk to future Kevin, and future Kevin says, hey, dude, I'm no longer agnostic. And then the apparition disappears, and you're like, wow, I wonder what I'll be. Am I going to be Buddhist, Hindu? Am I going to be a hardcore atheist that thinks he knows everything? What am I going to be? Am I going to be a Protestant Christian, Muslim, Jew? Any hunch?
Oh, man. So the cynical part of me worries that I would label myself as a hard atheist, and I'll explain why I have that worry. I have an engineering degree. I'm very science minded. I love math and science, and so I think that I have this empirical bias in my brain, probably, and so I always try to fight against it. But if I had this future apparition that appeared to me and says, hey, I'm not agnostic anymore, and then poof, disappears, my very first thought would probably be despair. Oh no, I have fallen prey to my empiricism. I'm an empiricist now. This is terrible. If I was less suspicious of my own, heart and my own future self, I might be happy thinking that I had actually made some kind of breakthrough, and then I had fallen into some kind of theism, I suppose. Who knows what that would be? I have no idea. But having solid arguments for something would be much preferable to just kind of calling myself a hard atheist for presumably no good reason and just kind of labeling myself as an empiricist. So I would worry, but maybe it would have a outcome. I don't know.
Well, we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna stay in touch, and I'm gonna be watching your channel. And we're gonna see what happens. But speaking of your YouTube channel, I want you to give me a summary, and this is a good exercise for you to do too. It's good for you to think about what you've been doing, like who you've been talking to, and what you've been learning, and what emphasis have you been placing, consciously or even unconsciously, where you look back, you watch back what you've been interviewing people or doing videos. You look back and you say, wow, I didn't realize, but I seem to put a real emphasis on this or that dimension of my life or of philosophy or of things in general. Have you learned anything about yourself, and where do you think that emphasis is now that you can see yourself and play it back? Because it's an interesting psychological phenomenon where we can look at ourselves, right? Yeah.
I'll give you an answer right now, but the best thing I can probably do is continue to reflect on this and think of a new answer every day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that recently where I just did 4 videos in a row about Eucharistic miracles. That was not where I saw my channel go. They were my best take at it, like, hey, like, let me go into this as open-minded as I can and kind of just see what the evidence looks like. That's not what I intended when I started my channel. What I really intended was having conversations exactly like this one. And so one video that I'm particularly proud of is I just did an interview with a PhD theologist whose dissertation was on transubstantiation. And so he's kind of like the world's leading expert on transubstantiation. And I was particularly proud of that interview. It was very challenging for me. He's much more intelligent than I am. But I felt honored to have that conversation, and I would like to make more content like that. But the Eucharistic miracles video came out of a Catholic friend of mine who suggested it to me. He's like, hey, I think you should really look into Eucharistic miracles. So this was kind of my like, hey, I'll take you up on that offer to look into the Eucharistic miracles. So that wasn't something that I had intended. It was just kind of something that fell upon me. But I would like to continue making more content like the interview with the world's leading expert in transubstantiation, because I think that's what that's what I gain the most from.
What's the difference in your experience between reading a bunch of books on philosophy, religion, or whatever, and just chatting, just in a very relaxed conversation, just chatting? What is it about a conversation with another human being who is so unique? What is it about that feeds your soul more sometimes than just reading a bunch of dusty old books?
The first thing that comes to mind is just like the interactivity of it. If I'm reading a book and a philosopher is building up this argument and he's got premise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and when I disagree on premise 1, I can't interrupt the author and be like, wait a minute, can you please explain premise 1 to me more? I don't know if I get that. He's just gonna move on. But when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I could be like, wait, hold on, pump the brakes. I'm particularly dense. Please explain premise 1 to me in more detail. So the interactivity of it is probably like the most valuable for me because I can be very dense. But another thing that I really like too is just that I think that there's a decent amount of communication that's lost when you only have the words in writing. I think that a lot of communication is nonverbal. So the very best form of communication is, the very best form of communication is face-to-face. Like if you and I were sitting at a coffee shop together with some really, like a fantastic cup of tea or coffee, and we were just chatting about this stuff, like live in person, that's the best.
It's better.
But what you and I are doing right now is darn close and saves us a ton of time and money with traveling. So I am more than happy to do pretty much the vast majority of my communication over a video call. But then, it gets worse after that if you try to, a phone call is better than YouTube comment sections because at least you get the inflection of the voice, even if you don't get the facial expressions. But then if you remove the inflection of the voice, you're left with text alone. And so text alone to me is absolutely better than nothing, but I much prefer doing what we're doing now because there's so much communication that's lost when you're relying on text alone.
For sure. I mean, I've had I mean, I didn't want to have confrontations with people over email, but it's happened because they can't read the tone, like just can't read the tone. And this is with friends and family. Friends and family, they can't read my tone. What's going on? You know?
Yeah, I've had the same thing happen to me, and perhaps that's a failing of my like writing skills. But I blame that on my engineering education. No, only partially kidding. But I think that I communicate more effectively when I can use facial expressions and when I can laugh and when I can change the inflection of my voice. I think that I do a better job communicating than I do when I'm just typing.
So not to gossip, but do you have like a spectrum of, you've already talked about some of the capital A atheists and they rub you the wrong way, or you don't like their approach or whatever, but do you have a spectrum sort of from cultural heroes, like you love this man or woman because of the way they communicate, all the way down to people you think are despicable because they're just trolling constantly with hatred in their heart? Just talk a little bit about that spectrum in terms of consumption, because there are a lot of people today, sadly, who have more social life online than in real life, and that's my case. Sadly,
Same.
It's just sad, but that's the way it is. We get a lot of content online, and we pick our favorites, you know, and we keep going back to the same talking heads and these sorts of things. Just talk a little bit about that personally, and then step back and look psychologically what maybe is happening with our society generally from your perspective.
Yeah, so for me personally, I can list people on both sides of the spectrum that I admire, and then I can list people on both sides of this, both sides of the theism divide.
Okay. Okay.
There's people that I admire and that I despise on both sides.
I see.
So let me start with the negative and then move to the positive. So, and let me not use the word despise because that's a very strong word. But let me say that yeah, there's people who I wouldn't want to emulate.
Okay.
So I think that somebody like Matt Dillahunty is somebody that I would not want to emulate on the atheist side.
Did you hear my conversation with him, by the way?
I did. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. No, I did not. That's on my to watch list. I watched the time that you called into the Atheist Experience and you didn't get Matt Dillahunty. You got
that was lame.
Apostate Prophet and somebody else.
That was lame. Yeah, I didn't enjoy that.
They didn't engage with you.
No,
they didn't, and they just don't have the education. I guess. I mean, neither do I. I do my best, but let me not. Yeah.
Anyway, you're going to enjoy the Matt Dillahunty one. I think.
It's on my to watch list. It is. So I don't want to emulate Matt Dillahunty, but then on the other side, there's a lot of people who I don't want to emulate, like Ken Ham. I don't think that Ken Ham is like a person that really many people should want to emulate. I don't think that he's like an intellectual icon. Yeah, and then there's other people too, like Kenneth Copeland and stuff like that, who I just think are not the best. But then let me talk about people who I really like on both sides of the spectrum. So on the atheist side, obviously Graham Oppy. Everybody talks about Graham Oppy, but I think that he's like an awesome thinker who I respect deeply. But then let me also list some other like smaller people who are just like on YouTube who I really appreciate and want to emulate. There's a YouTuber named Nathan Ortland, I think his last name is, but he goes by Digital Gnosis on YouTube.
Yeah. I've had both those guys on my show, by the way.
Get out of town! I haven't seen those episodes. I'm gonna have to watch the Digital Gnosis episode for sure.
Well, I interviewed him the first time he was Christian. The second time he was agnostic.
Okay. Yes.
And then I did like a 14-hour debunking of his arguments against Christianity.
I'm gonna have to check that out. That's awesome.
And my Graham Oppy one was pretty fun too.
I'm gonna check that out for sure. I've been digesting as much of your content as I can within the past. Well, it's only been like 3 or 4 days since, and you know, 2 of those days I had family over for Thanksgiving, so I wasn't doing too much YouTube. But you've made up a big chunk of my YouTube time for the past couple of days, and I think you'll continue to do so because your backlog is impressive.
I like both of those guys, by the way, but I don't know if Digital Gnosis really likes me. He seems to have bad chemistry with me, which I find I find regrettable, but that's just the way chemistry is. That's just the way chemistry is. You can't really, and I often wonder, this is a tangent, but I often wonder, you know, when I'm watching people on TV, like my wife and I watch reality TV, even though it's cringy, but we watch it. And I just love people. I love people, right? And I love picking my favorites, and I like even not liking someone, you know? But I often wonder, does that chemistry translate into real life? Like if I were to go and hang out with these people, would my favorites still be my favorites, and or would there be some changes? I wonder about that. Like I'm talking to you right now, I like you, but if we went for coffee, would your pheromones turn me off? I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting to think about.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think so either. I think the chemistry is reliable even through technology. That's what I think.
I think so too.
End of tangent.
And one more sentence on the tangent. You and I just seem like kind of kindred spirits in the ways that we communicate, in the ways that we try to search for truth.
I'm guessing that you are also of English, Irish, Scottish heritage. So there's something to that.
Yeah.
It sounds racist to say, but there is something to it.
Yeah, I think you're right. But then I think I had one category left of people who I don't admire. No, people who I do admire on the Christian side.
Right.
So there's a lot of people who I admire on the Christian side. So even somebody like the Joe Rogan of Christianity, Cameron Bertuzzi from Capturing Christianity, mad respect for him for converting in such a public manner. I think that takes a crazy amount of guts, and I think that takes a crazy amount of honesty to do that in such a public manner. I respect Cameron Bertuzzi for that alone. Even I view Cameron more as the guy who has the guests on. He's more of like the Joe Rogan than he is anybody else. But mad respect for him, even though I'm on the opposite side of the issue. Other people that I respect greatly are the people like the Trinity Radio people. I talk to them like every single live stream. So Trinity Radio is a Christian. They're the Christian ministry who loves atheists. I hang out over there all the time, just interact. So that's Braxton Hunter. He's a preacher from Indiana. He's part of Trinity Radio. There's people like Gavin Ortland, who I think does a very good job of like respectfully disagreeing with Catholics. I do engage a lot more with Catholic content than with non-Catholic content. But I think Gavin Ortland is like a shining example of like a non-Catholic Christian person who interacts in a charitable manner. And then there's people like Jimmy Akin I'm a huge fan of, people like Matt Fradd, Father Gregory Pine. I mean, the list goes on. There's the list of Catholic public figures and thinkers who I admire is way larger than the list of Catholic thinkers and public figures who I don't admire.
What about this is a little bit off the wall, but it just came to me. What about Pope Francis before your deconversion and after? What about Pope Francis?
I tried to adopt that. I forget the exact expression, but it's something like the most pious people who ever lived were the peasants who like never knew what was going on in Rome or something like that. So I tried to just tune it all out because I was not a fan of Francis at the time. However, I did wind up leaving the church. I never officially left the church, which is why I'm still kind of Catholic, depending on your definition of the word. But when I stopped practicing my Catholicism was 2018. So Francis had only been Pope for like some of the craziest stuff hadn't happened yet. Like when did Pachamama happen? 2000. That might have been like 2017 or something.
Yeah, just before the medical stuff happened.
Okay, yeah. So not everything that had happened today had happened at that time, but enough had happened that I knew I didn't like him. So I kind of just tried to tune him out.
Did your community badmouth the Pope?
Oh yeah, huge, yeah. The FSSP and the SSPX aren't as far removed as a lot of people think. So there was a decent like undercurrent of sedevacantism in my FSSP chapel. Yeah. So there was a lot of bad mouthing of Pope Francis. Ooh. And then, to their credit, there was a lot of people who also chimed in and said, hey, you shouldn't badmouth the Pope like that. I disagree with him too, but he's still the Pope and you shouldn't. Okay. So there was both. But there was sedevacantism for sure.
Wow.
Yeah. And today, what do I think about Pope Francis?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think that he's so like I still kind of when I think about Pope Francis, I'm probably still impacted by my traditionalist upbringing. So I'm even struggling. I think he's somebody who's trying his best to like keep the church unified when he sees this huge divide between like, the German bishops and the Synod on Synodality, and then he also sees the growing popularity of the traditionalist movement. And so I think that he's somebody who's trying to walk a tightrope, like politically. I think he's trying to be a politician. And I find that confusing because I feel like as a religious leader, it should be a lot more cut and dry, just to kind of say like, well, hey, like these guys are right and these guys are kind of heretics, so I don't listen to them. So I'm trying not to sound too negative, but I find Pope Francis confusing now, even as I found him confusing when I was still Catholic.
So the respect meter hasn't, the needle on the respect meter hasn't really moved.
Not a whole lot.
Okay. Just so you know, I do love and respect the Pope, and I also like him. I happen to like him, but I'm a quirky individual that I'm a bit rebellious in my nature. I like to swim upstream, and it makes me like him more that the rad trads don't like him.
That's awesome. That's really funny.
My friend, I got a couple friends in the chat. I got Nicola Krisick. Hey, brother, love you. And then I got David Walker. David Walker just made me laugh out loud. He said, I like your Ali G style of interviewing. You know who Ali G is?
The YouTuber?
He's David Sasha Cohen or whatever his name is, Ali G. He pretended to be a hip-hop rapper guy in England. Oh. He did a bunch of guerrilla interviews where he would embarrass politicians or famous people with awkward questions. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah.
That's pretty funny. So I'll take that as a compliment. This David Walker, I met him at church one time, one of the few Anglophone churches here in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I don't know if you know, do you know Montreal? Do you know?
No, I've never been to Canada.
Okay.
And I used to live in the Northeast United States, so I was like, 4 hours away from Canada at any given time. I never visited.
The state of the church here is in rough shape, but I suppose that's not really your concern anymore. But
I don't have a horse in the race.
Yeah. So this we've done an hour. I'd like to sort of pass over the reins to you now, and you can wrap it up whenever you feel like it. But in the meantime, you can ask me about my journey, or you can bring up topics that you're interested in, whether it has to do with my faith or my experience with, anything like that.
If you wouldn't mind jumping into some kind of like philosophical stuff.
Love it.
I really appreciate your take on a lot of philosophical stuff. So I kind of want to pick your brain while I have the opportunity.
Love it.
So let's go to that Venn diagram. And right in the center of the Venn diagram is the Catholic Church. Let me explain where I kind of see the center of the Venn diagram.
Okay.
And then I kind of just want to get your take on that and just kind of, riff with you and see where that takes us. So, because I essentially agree that there's some level of faith in order just to defeat solipsism. But I also view it as kind of the duty of the rational thinker to minimize the number of presuppositions that one must presuppose. So you, as a rational thinker, you should presuppose as few things as you must. That's kind of how I see things. That leads me to kind of presuppose a few things. So I presuppose that there is this objective world that we share, like, hard solipsism is false. And then I also presuppose things like the laws of logic, like the laws of identity, non-contradiction, and stoic middle. They seem to work all the time. But if they didn't work, I'm not sure how I would know that they didn't work. So I kind of just assume that they do. And I live my life more or less at peace with that. And that's about it. Those are really all the presuppositions that I make. The church makes a few more, and I'm going to use the word presupposition in a very sloppy manner here. But a dogma is something that Catholics have to accept. Now, I understand that there's grounding for these dogmas, but it's not something that a Catholic can question. And so to me, that makes that seem like the church leans more heavily into the faith side of that Venn diagram than I'm arguing the rational seeker should. So I guess my question to you is, how do you see the church at the center of the Venn diagram, and in particular with that faith balance? What is it about the church that makes you think like, they got the faith balance just right?
Yeah, well, we have to bear in mind the context, the very particular context, which is the church militant. The church militant is imperfect, it's flawed, it's full of wheat and weeds and sheep and wolves in sheep's clothing. It's a hot mess here below in this church militant. Okay, that's the context. The context is not the Garden of Eden. The context is not paradise lost or paradise found in heaven. That's not the context. The church triumphant is perfect, and there's no faith in heaven. Okay, there's just love. There's no hope. There's no faith. There's just love. Okay, that's the traditional Catholic teaching. So we're in the context of this messy, sloppy world where we don't even know if we're a brain in a vat. So that's the context. So when I talk about the Catholicism being in that sweet spot between faith, hope, and reason, I'm really talking about for a flawed sinner like myself, who's selfish and really struggling to adhere to the truth, much less to God and his will, that's where the struggle is. So that's the context for my Venn diagram. That's the context for this existential exploration or journey that each one of us is on. So that I really want to emphasize that. Now, in terms of the dogmas and faith sort of being imposed, you have to believe this, you can't not believe this. Well, no, you're living proof that you don't have to believe it. You're living proof. You are exploring. You are exploring. So you don't have the faith that I have. I have more faith. My Catholic faith is stronger than your Catholic faith at this particular time. Could we swap positions? Yeah, of course. We already have. We already have swapped position. My faith was weak. Your faith was strong. Now mine's stronger than yours. Whatever. It ain't over till the fat lady sings. So that's the overall context. And if you want to drill down and get more specific about the faith, doubt, and reason thing, then you could just ask away.
Maybe I can ask you something that you said. So you said so my faith in so. You said that here I am, proof of somebody who doesn't accept all the Catholic dogmas. And yeah, that's correct. My question to you is this. So I kind of start or end each of my videos with saying something like, I'm the non-traditional Catholic, or maybe ex-Catholic, it kind of depends on your terms. I've had a lot of people, when I tell people that I'm ex-Catholic, I've had a lot of Catholics say, well, actually, you're still Catholic because you were baptized, you've never been excommunicated, you never formally wrote a letter to the Archbishop of the diocese defecting, so you're still Catholic. But then I've also said, well, I'm kind of technically still Catholic, and I've had Catholics say, well, come on now, you're not really Catholic. So, but then you highlighted me as somebody who's proof of you didn't say a Catholic, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but we were discussing the center of the Venn diagram, which is the Catholic Church. And so the way that I interpreted what you said, which may not have been what you meant, is that I fall under that bucket of people in the middle of that Venn diagram, which is the Catholic Church. But I'm not certain that many Catholics would put me in that same bucket. So I'm just kind of wondering what your thoughts are. Would you call me Catholic?
Well, to answer that question, and it's a very important question. It's a very delicate question. My new way of answering this question, because it's the same question for you as it is for myself or for anyone else. It's the same question. Who is a Catholic? What is a Catholic? And Vatican II, I don't know how you feel about Vatican II, but Vatican II answers the question very, very, very charitably. And I know that if there's anything you value, you as an agnostic, it's charity, right? The charitable answer given by the Church in the Sacred Council of Vatican II is that there are only two kinds of people. You may have heard me say this before, and my listeners are sick of hearing it, but I love it. There are two kinds of people: those who ultimately will say no, end up in hell, and then everyone else who is a member of Christ. And there are three kinds of people that are members of Christ: those who have the faith and are in the state of grace. Okay, so if you've been to a confession recently and you have the faith, then you're in that first category. The second category, you have the faith, but you're not currently in the state of grace. So you're in the state of mortal sin, but you're going to go to confession in 5 minutes from now, and you're going to fix that situation. The third category of members of the body of Christ is the one that I'm most interested in, and it's the most charitable thing I've heard the Church say, which is that if you don't have the faith, and certainly you're not in the state of grace, but you're not in the state of grace, but you don't even have the faith, you are a potential member of the church. You're a member of Christ because you have the potential to eventually, before you die, get the faith and get in the state of grace. And that's how I view you. Why? Not because I'm a nice guy. That's how I view you, because that's what Mother Church tells me. I have to view you as a potential member of the church, because the alternative is that you are going to hell. That's the alternative. And the church says, no, 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 no. We cannot say that. We cannot say that even after you're dead. So Kevin drops dead today. No, touch wood quickly.
Fingers crossed. Not yet, all rules.
We'll say tomorrow to make it a little bit less painful.
Okay, much better.
And so I can, the church will not say that you're in hell. The church will not say that, okay? We're going to find out on Judgment Day. But in the meantime, we say, well, it's in God's hands, and we have to give the benefit of the doubt, and we cannot despair. It's a sin to despair of the salvation of yourself or of anyone else that's alive on this planet. And Christ died for Kevin. And so we have to give the benefit of the doubt. And so you are, in my eyes, as sort of to wrap this up with a bow and to just give the short answer is, I believe that you are a potential member of the Catholic Church. Okay,
now here's a follow-up question. Isn't every living human a potential member of the Catholic Church?
No, I'm a full member in good standing, and I'm in the state of grace, and
yes, let me fix that. Isn't every human living either a member or a potential member of the Catholic Church?
No, because unfortunately, some are going to go to hell.
But even those who go to hell aren't like predestined to go to hell, right?
No,
while they're living?
Yeah. While they're living, because we take the perspective of God, and we're not Calvinists, okay? We acknowledge free will and grace, and they work together mysteriously. But the sad reality is, the church teaches me, the sad reality is that humans can and do choose to go to hell. That's the sad reality. And we just don't have a list here below to say, yep, Kevin's on the naughty list, he's going to hell, so, treat him accordingly. What would that look like?
That'd be awful. Oh, geez.
Oh, boy. So I hope you understand. It's a very nuanced position that I take. It's the Catholic position, emphasized by Vatican II and other writings before that, that says that we cannot presume that anyone's lost. God forbid. God wants everyone to be saved, and God took on flesh and died for us so that we could be saved. And those, those means of salvation are available to us, especially when you have the faith and you've availed yourself of the faith and you're in the state of grace. That's the best place to be. And I hope to God that that's where I am. And I haven't been to confession for a few weeks. I'm going to go soon. But it's important. It's very important to me to remain in the state of grace, because I don't know when I'm going to die.
I was going to confession once a week when I was still Catholic. I was, I was in it. I was really in it. I'm going to ask you a really, really difficult question. And so absolutely feel free to say, Kevin, I really can't give you a solid answer on this right now. I'll think about it and then write you an email later. So this is going to be a tough one. In your opinion, if I died right now, or even tomorrow and I didn't go to confession, do you think that I'd stand a chance of making it to heaven, even with a long stay in purgatory? Or do you think that since I'm currently not convinced that, Catholicism is true, that it's kind of game over for me?
Well, I mean, I think I tend to err on the side of presumption, because you've got despair on the one side. We're not allowed to despair of anyone's salvation, but we're not allowed to presume either, right? So I can't despair, I can't presume, so I have to leave in God's hands and this sort of thing. So I'm just preparing my answer. My answer is that I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. That is a sincere, authentic, you can see it in my eyes, you can feel it in my voice. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. You could drop dead right now in front of me, I would not be worried about it. Okay? Because I see that you love truth, you love, charity is number one for you. And if the rad trads want to say, oh, David, you're too liberal and this and that, go ahead. I don't care. Like you're trash talking the vicar of Christ and you're worried about little old me. I'm a nobody. Yeah. Say what you want. Okay, I tend to be very liberal when it comes to that, but I do tend to err on the side of presumption, and I shy away from despair. So I'm going to be praying for you. As you know, I'm going to be praying for you. And time is elastic. If you've ever done any hard drugs, you know time is elastic. Have you done hard drugs?
Nothing worse than weed. So no, not hard enough to...
If you do enough weed is a hard drug. It is a hard drug if you do enough of it. But
You would call it hard?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Maybe I
yeah,
just
yeah.
haven't done the right stuff.
Well, it's about quantity. It's about quantity.
Okay, fair enough.
I ate a gram of hash and smoked a bunch of joints, and I had a really, really dark preternatural experience that haunts me to this day. But anyway, I'm not worried about you because God loves you and Christ died for you. I mean, Satan is an idiot. He's just an idiot. And like his power over you is given to him by God. And it's just like, it's playing out exactly the way it has to be for you, given your proclivities, given your taste, given your intellect, given your will, everything. It's custom made for you. It's like, I'm excited. I'm excited to meet you. I'm excited to see where you go. And if you drop dead, God forbid, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. So I think that tells you the sort of confidence I have in God. But your will, the trick for me is, do you have goodwill, or are you full of hatred and vitriol and selfishness? You don't strike me that way, so I'm really not worried about you.
I do my best.
Period. Yeah. And
Cool.
I'm not just saying that. It's authentic.
I don't think you are just saying that. I can tell. I like to think that I'm a good judge of character. And you don't seem like somebody who would just say that for the sake of my feelings or something. You strike me as somebody who would say the truth even if it did hurt my feelings. And so I do think that your answer was, super honest and authentic. And honestly, it was probably one of I asked this question to a whole bunch of people. And when I talked to the rad trads, it's like, well, you definitely hell. Not all the rad trads, of course, but so your answer was one of my favorites, I think, that I've ever heard. I think that was a very good answer.
Yeah, I think I don't need to tell you that, I don't need to explicitly tell you that, yeah, I would be excited if you found your way back into the faith and the state of grace. I don't need to tell you that, right? You know that.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you know what the church is, you know what it teaches. I don't need to sit here and bash you over the head like, okay, you've got till next Thursday to, get back in shape or whatever. It's like, that's just not the way it works. Saint Augustine's mother, Saint Monica, she said, or God said to her, or somehow she documented it, or Saint Augustine documented it, that it's not about talking to the person, the wayward person about God. It's talking to God about the wayward person. So that's really the approach that I try to embrace. So I'll have a very serious talk with God about you.
That's all I can ask for.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me kind of jumping to a different topic now. Of course. So I'm super interested to kind of explore a little bit more about our opposite stories. So I kind of explained my thought process from Catholic to agnostic. And I have watched some of your videos. So I know a little bit of the answer. So feel free if you want to kind of, skip over some of the stuff that you're just bored to tears explaining over and over and over again.
Sure.
But I'd love to hear more about your journey into the faith. And then I might try to, poke and prod a little bit where I have like questions where something doesn't make sense to me.
I'd rather do it with short form answers. So you give me a very specific question.
Okay.
I give a short answer. Then you do the follow-up question. I give a short answer because I don't want to ramble like I've done so many times and I'm really sick of hearing it.
Okay. So the jump from deism to theism.
Never did it. Never.
Really?
Did it.
Okay. Never. I was going to say that I don't think I've heard you talk about it.
No.
So when you said that you never did it, how did you get from atheism to theism without bridging that deism gap?
Well, it's well documented that I was reading René Descartes' Discourse on Method, and I was a hard solipsist at the time. Okay. So that's some context, some pretty heavy context. And I was also an atheistic Satanist, explicitly calling myself a Satanist. Didn't believe in God or Satan, but Anton LaVey style of Satanism.
Right.
Reason, whatever, all that nonsense. Because I've always been prone to rationalism. That's sort of I sort of attracted to rationalism. I like Spinoza, stuff like that. So I was reading René Descartes, and I just realized, because he gave me an out. He just said, well, there's no solution to hard solipsism, but, we just know that God is good and that he exists and that, that was it. Boom. He gave me just a little crack in the door. It wasn't scientific. It wasn't like deep. It wasn't philosophically rigorous. It was just like, well, of course God is God, you know, and then I'm just like, boom, I'm out of here. I'm done with this solipsism. I'm in, 100% in. I'm not the source of my own existence. God is the source of my existence. I don't know who or what he is, but I know that he is life, and I partake of life. I'm a participant in life, and God is life. God is that eternal life that is without beginning. And I was so excited to be a generic monotheist. I still hated Christ. I still hated the church. And I still hated, in particular, the Catholic Church. But I was so excited to no longer be God. What a feeling. What a feeling. Amazing.
Yeah. So, you know, I have a couple questions here, I guess, because I spent a while in this, like, you know, deistic cavern, right? Like, you know, on the one side you have like theism, and on the other side you have, like, you know, at least like some kind of non-theism. I'm not going to call it atheism, but agnosticism. They all kind of live on the other side. But I spent probably close to a year in this like deistic, you know, abyss where I figured, okay, I've got this like this ground, right? I've got this like uncaused cause in this very like, you know, classically theist kind of way, but I can't say anything about this thing having a mind. Like this thing could just be like a force, in the same way that gravity is, as far as we can tell, just one of the 4 forces at work in the universe. Maybe this thing is just like the grounding force. Like it's why there's something instead of nothing. And that's kind of all I know about it. And I was there for a long time. So I guess, does this jump over this cavern, this deistic cavern for you, fall under the faith part of the Venn diagram? No. As opposed to the, oh, okay.
No. I know with certainty, without recourse to faith or any faith-based beliefs, I know with certainty that God exists and that he is not only subsistent being, but that he has these transcendentals and these attributes. Okay, God is love. I know that. I know that God is wisdom. I know all of this through classical theism. And I was a generic monotheist. I was a classical theist before I became a Christian. When I became a Christian, that was my leap of faith. And I want to help you with a simple principle called the principle of proportionate causality. I can help you to debunk your deism, even though you're over it now, but I can help you to help someone else to debunk their deism just by asking you very simply, do you love?
So I would say yes, but here's where you and I might have a hard time with a conversation like this. I'm a nominalist. So I don't actually think that love is like a thing. When you say, do you love? And I say yes, what I'm saying is there are neurons that fire in my brain that make me feel a certain way.
You think love's a feeling?
Mm-hmm.
So you seriously think that Jesus Christ, the God-man, Jesus Christ, commanded us to have good feelings towards our enemies?
Oh, so I don't think that Jesus Christ is God-man anymore, right?
Of course,
so,
of course.
But so I think that like the historical Jesus may have said something like "love your enemies."
Yeah,
I think that he may have said that.
And
yes.
What do you think he meant?
Oh, he probably didn't have any idea what a neuron was. So, well, you know,
okay, from your perspective, your perspective,
right?
Of course. Yeah, from your perspective. But you didn't used to think that.
No, I didn't used to think that. I didn't arrive at this nominalism until I was already in this deistic cavern, to be honest.
Yeah. So we're gonna have to like play a lot of hypothetical games, like thinking about like putting myself in your shoes and like going back in time, how I used to see and these sorts of things. It's very complicated. But when you look at me and I say that I'm Catholic, you understand that when I talk about Jesus commanding us to love our enemies, you have to understand from your agnostic, whatever position, that I believe that love is not a feeling. Love is not just some, random configuration of matter, energy, and space-time. You have to understand that I believe that I was created by an all-good God, and that love is an act of the will where we wish, we have goodwill, we wish the best, and we, it has nothing to do with good feelings, because the whole notion of an enemy stirs up natural feelings of antagonism and all the rest. So we don't stifle those feelings and try to overlay them like a blanket of snow in Luther's worldview, where there's the dung covered in snow and I've got my hatred and my antagonism covered up with this forced smile. No, The feelings are there naturally, and God was not frustrated when he wanted to create humans to be natural. And they are natural. We are natural. We have natural proclivities and inclinations and tastes. And when I talked earlier to you about chemistry, you and I have good chemistry. I've had Catholics on my show. I won't mention their names. And I had bad chemistry with these, hardcore Catholics. It's just chemistry. So Jesus Christ understands that we have this certain proclivities and chemistry. And he's not trying to do something unnatural. Far from it. He wants us to live in accordance with nature, in accordance with reality, and wishing the best for our fellow men. Like, I mean, you appreciate it. You appreciate it that I wish you well and that I'm not worried about your eternal salvation. You appreciate that, and you can feel that that's a charitable position. And it's the same thing with my enemies, even those like Matt Dillahunty you mentioned, or Aaron Ra. I happen to have good chemistry with Aaron Ra. I like him a lot. But with Matt Dillahunty, he was annoying. But I can distinguish very easily my feelings of antagonism or whatever it might be from my sincere desire, which is authentic. I really, really, really am excited to see Matt Dillahunty in heaven. It's amazing. It's amazing. Or Hitler. I use the example of Hitler. Like, I'm excited to see Hitler in heaven. I hope he's there. Is there good reason to doubt, that he'll make it? Yeah, there is, sadly, unfortunately. Same thing with Judas. But, it is what it is. I'll celebrate either way, but it would be kind of be nice to see all the bad guys up in heaven. So it's all about that goodwill. It's all about that goodwill.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's super cool when Catholics say, I hope I see Hitler in heaven, because I feel like that turns heads. But what's the alternative? Like, you hope he's in hell? Like, what are you, a monster? Like, you hope that somebody's in hell? You know what I mean? I think you're being consistently Catholic when you say that you hope that Hitler is in heaven. And even though that turns some heads, I think that's the right way to be.
I don't want to get all prideful, but I do look down my nose when I see online Christians wishing hell on other Christians.
I know. It's like,
oh, I'm so tempted to judge these Christians. I'm so tempted. It's unbelievable. So Satan's working through very mysterious ways when he puts two Christians fighting online for me to watch. It's like, oh, I feel so superior. I allow myself to say that I feel superior, because that's reality. I do feel superior to those people. But I also have an intellect, and I know that I'm not. I know that I'm not. I know that I'm not, because I know that I'm a faithless sinner too. And I'm worse. I'm worse. I'm worse. I know myself, and I know that I'm worse than any of these hypocrites online.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It is fun to feel superior. It is a lot of fun.
If you don't mind turning back to the love thing.
All I was going to say is that you love, and an effect cannot be more perfect than its cause. Therefore, God loves. Period. End of argument. But you've gone to nominalism, which just undermines everything. It undermines everything. So I don't know where we're going to go from here.
Yeah. So nominalism wouldn't undermine materialism.
Okay. So you've got a bunch of individual things, I guess, for lack of a better word, and there's some patterns and some similarities and some differences, and and it just is what it is, basically, right?
Yeah. But that's where I'm at. I'm a mereological nihilist. So in the sense of me existing as something apart from the things that make me up, I would deny that. I would say that I am the things that I am the combination of the things that make me up.
You're an epiphenomenon.
Yeah. So I am. So when I say Kevin, what I really mean is the mereological simples arranged Kevin wise.
Okay.
And as best as, and I know it sounds silly to like a lot of people, but as best as I can parse things, this seems to be the most parsimonious view that I can imagine. I don't need anything else beyond the mereological simples arranged Kevin-wise to explain all the things that Kevin does and Kevin is. And so like positing something beyond the mereological simples arranged Kevin-wise just seems unneeded to me. Are
there any household names that hold your exact view on this?
Household names? I don't know. I think that people, like certain YouTubers, are heading in like a meteorological nihilistic way. I've heard people like Alex O'Connor, Cosmic Skeptic, talk about meteorological nihilism recently, but the guy who I turn to as like the meteorological nihilist guy is Ted Sider. Ted Sider is a philosopher. He has a paper that changed my life when I read it called Against Parkhood. And that's like a 2013 or 14 paper. I didn't read it though until 2018 or 19.
Cider is spelled how?
Sider.
Okay.
And Theodore Sider.
Okay.
He goes by Ted, but he's the philosopher that like single-handedly made me a meteorological nihilist. He's not a household name, so I you know, is there a household name? Like, not really. But there's a guy.
Okay.
His name is Ted Sider. And yeah, being like 100% honest with you, I feel like my meteorological nihilism is probably either that or my nominalism, which kind of seem to go hand in hand, really. Those would be like the biggest like hurdles. Like I can't find a way to be both Catholic and a meteorological nihilist, right?
Yeah.
Like they seem like they're incompatible with each other.
Yeah.
So like I'm gonna have to lose the meteorological nihilism in order to become Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Like I maybe there's somebody way smarter than me who can actually make them work together, but I haven't figured out a way.
You can't even be a nominalist in a Catholic.
Right, exactly. You have to be a moderate realist at least. So without like removing those barriers for me, I don't see a way to the church. Yeah, what do you think about that? Like, you know,
I think it's.
I'm sure you've had a lot to say.
Well, no, I don't have a lot to say. I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, which is you're young, you're exploring, you're having fun, and then you're going to suffer. You're going to suffer a lot. And then you're going to reach out to God and you're going to say, hey, I don't care about all that straw, the house of cards that I built. Bye. See ya. I'm not attached to that anymore. Right now, I'm suffering and I'm in an existential crisis, and God help me. Boom. All this fantasy you have about nominalism and your nihilism, whatever you want to call it, is just a childish fantasy. No offense intended. It's just It's just a childish fantasy, and you're going to see one way or another. And I think probably, if I had to guess, I would say through suffering.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that beliefs reached this way? Do you think that reaching a belief in that manner is like a reliable pathway to reaching true beliefs?
Through suffering and desperation?
Yeah, like through like reaching out in desperation and suffering.
Yeah, because you let go of illusions, you let go of all the fantasy, and you cling desperately to what? You cling to reality. That's what it is. That's my conversion story, is letting go of my fantasies, my many, incoherent fantasies that were built up by reading philosophy for 10 years and just being a selfish human, and gripping on for dear life to reality. That's the conversion process every time. It's always the same thing. And you've admitted yourself, you're dense. You're a dimwit.
Yeah.
You're a dimwit. You're a dimwit. Just keep reminding yourself. Remind yourself. And God is not a dimwit. He's not stupid. He is wisdom itself. So, I mean, you're going to, when you reach your breaking point existentially, you will cling to God unless your love of self and your pride and your rebellion is so powerful. And I don't see that. I just don't see that. You're not a candidate for me, for someone that's going to flip the bird to God even when you're desperate and when you're suffering. I see you as someone that's going to just say, yeah, I'm a silly kid. And I found my daddy. Like, my daddy is here and he's telling me that he loves me, and my natural response is to reciprocate that love, period. Even though my love is imperfect, even though I'm silly, even though I'm small, I'm just a child. That's the reality of the conversion experience that I envision for you and for everyone, and including myself, okay? Because I'm clinging to all kinds of fantasies and checklists with my religiosity, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. It's the same for me, okay? It's the same thing for me. I'm stupid, I stink, I'm going to get sick and die. We're all in the same boat. But all this fancy philosophical talk is useful because that's part of the journey. That's part of the journey. But you're going to put it in perspective, like one way or another, sooner or later, you're going to put it all into perspective, and God's going to help you, and God has a plan for that. So that's my perspective.
There's a lot that I have in mind here, but I would worry about getting bogged down.
Sure.
Do you want to maybe
We
kind
can
of
move
put
on.
a pin? Yeah, we could put a pin in that right there and probably move on. Okay. Well, tell you what, David, maybe if I can ask one, I've kept you for what, an hour and a half already. Maybe I can ask like one kind of final question for you,
Sure.
and then move into like a wrap up. Okay. Something I've been talking about like recently in my conversations with various Catholics is Pascal's wager. And sometimes I get Pascal's wagered before I can bring it up myself. And I'm glad it didn't happen this time, because now I get to look like the person who brought it up. But the way that I often phrase it is this: I think that I've taken Pascal's wager, in as much as we spoke about this a little bit at the beginning. I'm looking for truth and following wherever it leads, and I think that that's better than just kind of going through the motions and hoping I'm right. Would you agree with my characterization as I'm going through Pascal's wager? And then I guess, like, if you do or don't, like, would put yourself in my shoes and imagine that you are convinced of the things that I'm convinced of, namely like mereological nihilism and nominalism and these things. And like, what would you do if you were me? Like, besides just wait for something bad to happen, I suppose.
No. I think suffering is just sort of like the most dramatic conversion, the means to conversion. But you can certainly think your way back to God. There's no doubt about that. You can definitely change your mind about your pet theories. There's no doubt about that. Okay, no doubt about that. If I talk to you in a year from now, I guarantee you're going to have some modifications that you've embraced.
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
I have modifications from yesterday.
Yeah,
like,
exactly,
for sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the nature of this journey that you're on. You want to give me your most popular or favorite phrasing of Pascal's wager, so I can deal with it in a concrete manner.
Yeah. So when I think of Pascal's wager, I think of a Christian saying, hey, if you're not sure, it's better for you to just choose to believe it, because the consequences of you not believing it and being wrong are way worse than the consequences of you believing it and being wrong.
That seems weak to me. That seems very weak to me. I would rebel against that if I were you. If I were you, I'd rebel against that. And I'd just say, well, hey, I have free will and reason. I don't know if you believe that you have free will and reason, but
I'm a compatibilist, so I'm like I think that I have will. That adjective "free" before it is like a little funny, but I'm a compatibilist about free will.
Okay, so. Okay. Anyway, you could just say to anyone that throws down the gauntlet, it's like, what I would say is, hey, I'm going to do me and you do you. How's that?
Yeah. Cool.
And, why would you believe a lie? Why would you believe a lie willingly? I don't think you would. Like, I mean, if you told me a different story other than the story you told me. If you told me living on the streets and I got my girls, they're making money for me and I supply them with the drugs and this is my lifestyle and I got the guns and I got this and that and I'm doing all this crime and whatever, then I might think, this guy seems to be motivated by some nasty, selfish motivations. But your path, I think, is motivated by the good, aka God. Period. Right? So, Pascal's wager, it's like, yeah, you're doing it. You're evaluating right now. What you're doing is you're evaluating both sides. You're just evaluating both sides. That's what I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that's what you're doing. So
I like to think that's what I'm doing anyway. I'm doing my best.
Do you have any exciting future guests coming up that we can look forward to seeing on your show?
I fly by the seat of my pants. I don't know what I'm doing on YouTube. So no, I don't know what kind of video I'm putting out, like, tomorrow. And, so no, I have no guests on the horizon to look out for. I wish I did.
How did you find the Eucharist guy?
Well, so it's funny. He actually, for a long time, I didn't have a YouTube channel, but I commented in, Pints with Aquinas' live chat and stuff like that. And this Catholic YouTuber, Kyle Whittington, was just starting his channel. He now has a couple hundred, 500, perhaps 600 subscribers, way more than me. I have like 50. I was commenting just my thoughts. And Kyle, I said something about how I'm an ex-traditionalist, and Kyle was like, "Oh, you sound interesting. Do you want to come on my show for an interview?" So I did. I went on the show for an interview, and he said, "Well, why don't you start your own channel?" And so I did. I started my own channel, and that was just like 2 months ago or whatever now. And then Kyle just challenged me. He said, "Hey, I think it would be cool if you like did an exploration of Eucharistic miracles, but make sure that you're being fair about it, and don't accuse anybody of dishonesty without like really solid evidence of dishonesty." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I think I'm going to do my best." So that's how Kyle wound up challenging me. Kyle Whittington. He's an excellent Catholic YouTuber for anybody who might be listening.
A lot of I struggle, I have to be honest, I do struggle to get guests, and lately people luckily have been sending me tips and like email addresses and contact info, and even just directly intervening to get it to happen. So I don't know if it's my communication style that doesn't work or what it is, but it's just been a struggle to get people to come on. And that's of all stripes, like Catholic, non-Catholic, atheist, whatever. Like it's just, is people maybe are shy, or they just see that I don't have good numbers on my podcast, so they're just not interested for that reason. I don't know. But if you do know some freaky individuals that you want to send my way, I'd really appreciate it. And when I say freaky, I just mean opinionated.
Yes.
Hardcore feminist, hardcore vegan, whatever it is, just send them my way. Anyone that's opinionated, I just love talking to people.
I can think of a couple people. I'm going to send your contact info to a couple people. Just be like, "Hey, if
that's
you
the best
want
way
to talk to somebody, just here you go." And David, your conversation style worked perfectly for me. So
good.
If you ever wanted to do this again one day, I am more than happy to come back on.
Yeah. I don't know if you know, but I do have repeat guests. Like I've had some people on like 10 times, this sort of thing. So I like that. I do like that. I like that a lot. And I like what I really like, what I really, really, really like and I'm excited by is seeing changes in perspective. Like where I hate this word evolve, but just means change,
I used it too, and I don't like it either, but yeah.
But you're going to change, and I'm going to change, and my attitudes are changing, and it's just fun. It's just fun to catch up. That's part of the trip with this podcast. So I really appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for simulcasting. And we'll definitely talk again for sure.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you for helping me with my audio problems at the beginning. I'm showing how green I am. All this stuff.
Not a problem, my friend. So God bless you. I'm going to be praying for you and yours, and I hope that you'll send good vibes my way.
I will. I always wish that I could say something like I'm praying for you too. It's not true, right? Because I'm not there. And I can say I'm sending good vibes your way, but I don't think that actually does anything. So normally what I settle for at this point is just, hey, I honestly, thoroughly, really appreciate it. I really do, because you can offer me something that I can't offer you without lying about it, right? I could lie and tell you that I'm going to pray for you, but I don't think it's veridical. So, so the best, the response that I give is just, hey, honestly, really, thank you, because you're wishing me something better than the best thing on earth, really, right? Yeah. You're wishing me heaven. So gratitude is really all I can offer you. So gratitude it is. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll talk very soon, my friend.
All right. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.